Bryan Fischer joins us. Scott Gerard alongside Matt Wells, former coach at Utah State, Texas Tech, and last year at Kansas State. Bryan Fischer from Sports Illustrated with us. Bryan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Staying busy, that's for sure.
Well, there's never a dull moment in your world. Do you feel like there's any movement whatsoever? I saw that a bill's getting introduced, but are you feeling like there's any momentum at all for putting guardrails up with the NCAA and any help from Congress?
Oh, that's a $1 million question at this point. I think you talk with folks that either have been in the Hill or even folks on the Hill itself, and directly connected to a lot of senators out there and a lot of representatives, and there's some optimism, I guess, but I feel like we're almost kind of to the point of no return. I mean, a lot of these, a lot of folks are already, thinking about the re-election campaigns and what they're going to do for the next couple of years. So there's a lot going on in Washington. And I, wrote a column of this yesterday after the Trinidad Chambliss ruling. The NCAA really needs to kind of stop thinking that this is going to be a savior at some point in terms of Congress, and, start doing what they can to really control what's in their purview. Because at this point, I think it's almost going down, a road that is going to be difficult. And I understand that a lot of people in Congress are saying the right things, and they're promising a lot of things, and we've had certain bills get out of committee and even come close to reaching votes. But at this point, in terms of actually getting that over the line, getting an actual bipartisan solution, I just don't sense that we're any closer to that actually happening and transpiring than we were 6 months ago. And so I think for a lot of leaders in the NCAA, that's probably not what they want to hear, but that's kind of the state of play of things right now.
With Trinidad getting that extra year, what do you think of Ole Miss?
Oh, I think it's huge for them. Obviously, you look at their schedule, in the first month alone. I think you look at that, and it's not just the opener against Louisville. You want to have a veteran quarterback, and with so much change, obviously a lot of new coaches coming in there, especially on the offensive side of the ball. For Pete Golding to kind of turn this team over, Trinidad, and he's a very gregarious young man. You can understand why he is a leader on that team. I think it was huge for that program, and that's another team, in the mix, certainly in the SEC. I don't know if they're going to be quite as good as they were last year. We can certainly see how that evolution occurs. But when you got a guy like that, opposing defensive coordinator's got a game plan consistently for every week, you can win a lot of games. And I would imagine Ole Miss is going to be right there in the end, having a pretty similar season to that they just had last year.
In talking to Coach Wells here, we're talking about Morgan Scalley and what it takes to go from being a good lieutenant to being a great general. And we've all assumed that Morgan will be great at it. I still believe Morgan will be great at it. But just how much expectations should we have, realistic expectations for the first year or two with Morgan as the head coach?
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I do think this is a transition that has been certainly in the works for a long time. He's really been preparing for this role, right? Not just in terms of actually putting it in writing that he was going to take over for Kyle, but I think mentally, he's kind of gone about things in terms of preparing, like, I am going to take over one day, and it can be certainly difficult when you get that elevation, and suddenly you're answering to 20 people are coming at you instead of just 5 or 10, and that'll be the thing. To kind of understand how that process works. I think the key in my mind, just in terms of the program and having success short term is, can you make sure that the recruiting gains that you've made these last couple of years, with the program, not only in the transfer portal, but with those high school guys, making sure those relationships are good, making sure those relationships keep rolling. And that to me is going to be the thing. Is recruiting going to stay at the same level, or maybe even elevate a little bit with some new energy, some new blood within the program? I think that's going to be key, especially given how difficult the Big 12 is nowadays. We all know it's almost a coin flip type of league, in terms of those fine margins. And so finding the right guys that not only fit your culture and fit your program, but can bring something to the table, in terms of the X's and O's as well. That's going to be key for this youth program under Morgan and moving forward for sure.
BYU is able to retain a lot of players coming back into next year, especially on the defensive side. Asking for another 11-1 season might be a bit too much to ask for, but what are realistic expectations for BYU next year?
Yeah, I kind of went out on a little bit of a limb, when they always ask us, to do our kind of like initial top 25s, right after the national title game. And this year at SI, we kind of did something a little different in terms of actually making our kind of early initial playoff brackets, and I put BYU in there. I think just in terms of scratching at the surface year after year, and I think that does mean a lot, and especially when you do consider that they are bringing back so many experienced and veteran guys. Now, yes, there's going to be some holes. There's going to be some things they got to figure out. Certainly in spring ball and going into the season in terms of some positions, but this looks like a veteran team primed to have that kind of breakthrough, and they have been scratching at the surface these last couple of years, getting ever so close to not only winning the Big 12, but getting into the playoff. And I think this year, especially with Notre Dame coming to town, a big marquee opponent, they've got the schedule to get over the hump and be a playoff team this year, especially given the way and the direction that Kalani has that program going.
Bryan, this is Matt Wells here. How you doing?
Doing well, Matt.
Good. Hey, let me ask you and just throw this out to you. You're a guy that's on the national scene in college football and all the Power Four leagues. Give us a little bit of an idea with your conversations, probably on the record and off the record, just your view on the college football landscape and the calendar and some things that are going on. Where does it lie in maybe making it less chaotic for everybody involved and maybe a little bit more uniform in terms of your perspective?
Yeah, I think if you had to say what is the kind of big off-season conversation really these next couple of months, there's several NCAA committees kind of devoted to this that are studying this and debating this. I think really industry-wide, whether it's ADs, commissioners, certainly coaches, everybody's kind of getting to the point where they have ideas on the calendar, and I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're talking about those ideas, and eventually there will be some movement. I know there's been certainly a lot of talk in terms of the calendar itself maybe moving up in terms of week 0. I think we're probably not quite ready to kind of commit to that. I think at this point, I think there are going to be some conversations with the broadcast partners that will have some impact on that I know a lot of the commissioners are keeping top of mind. But, look, I think that is the thing that everybody's going to be talking about really the next 6 to 8 months. I think really leading into the season, it's going to be what does this league think of things, and where do you want the transfer portals and what windows are go where. And so I think that's going to be a really driving the conversation this offseason. We've kind of gone away. We've kind of at least had some sort of stability in terms of NIL and bring in the CSC and all that stuff. So I think now it really will turn that attention to what do the Power Four leagues in particular kind of want in terms of the football calendar, and how does that impact everything else?
Yeah, certainly the TV guys, as we all know, and those executives in terms of television have a huge say in college football as we all know it. What's the appetite for the playoffs, do you think, out there? Is there anything that can get done this summer? Do you think it'll get expanded, or are we going to stay the same? What's the landscape right now for that?
Yeah, I feel like we're on the same hamster wheel, and this has really been the case, I would say, for the last even longer than 6 months at this point. I think if you had to kind of poll a lot of the conferences, in terms of kind of just the general tenor of what they view the playoffs should be, I would say 90% of them out there are going to say, let's go ahead and move to 16. Let's add a couple of more first round games, maybe tweak the calendar a little bit in terms of where those are played and everything going on kind of in those early rounds. At least include a little bit more teams and kind of move that cut line, if you will, towards playoff inclusion a little bit further back. But at the end of the day, this is a Big Ten and SEC decision, and that's where the fracture is. And so I don't see the Big Ten giving in at this point. Maybe somebody can get to Tony Petitti and kind of shake him loose of all these terrible ideas like going to 24 teams. But at this point, they're pretty dug in the Big Ten, and so I think that kind of says, look, we're kind of going with the status quo right now, and until the Big Ten at least wants to come to the table, start compromising, talk with the SEC, and really get on the same page as the rest of college football. I don't see much movement, honestly, and I think we're going to be set at 12 for the foreseeable future as a result.
I don't pretend to know what the driving force is behind their reluctance to do that, but like as coaches look at it, and I know certainly from my experience, I look at it and go, man, the state of Texas has 16 playoff games. They'll play 16 until they crown a champion right around Christmas time, right, in the state of Texas, and they'll have one bye week, and you look at the FCS playoffs. I mean, why can't we get this thing to be crowned a champion right around the 1st of January, and maybe we start a week early and you still have one bye week, but to expand the playoffs, I guess that's mainly what a lot of coaches I know that I've talked to see, because you literally you see it being done right now at other levels, and so I think that's certainly a big. I think that's a big thing in the coaches right now, or a lot of coaches around the country, is why can't we expand just a little bit and back this thing up and get this thing to end, so then you can have a portal window and at least some semblance. Now, what you can't control is when coaches, are fired and hired and all that, right, in December. But my goodness, I mean, like, game planning for a playoff game and conference championship games and portal and this and that. And I mean, it's all coming, at the same time. But, man, I know that there's a huge appetite in everybody's mind in college football to get this calendar right, Bryan.
Well, yeah, and I think it's really going to kind of come to a head, this season. I think as we kind of live this year, obviously we're going back to more of a single bye week compared to the last couple of years where we've had two. So I think that's going to reinforce it, certainly with a lot of coaches for sure. But I think it will come to a head with the administrators dealing with the complaints from their coaches, certainly hearing it from their fans when injuries might crop up and have a bad season. And I think truly when we get into December and January, because of those long layoffs, I mean, I think you kind of already heard it, those complaints last year and this past season in terms of, all right, it's too long between the semifinals and the quarterfinals. Well, this year it's even longer. We're going to go back to January 25th to play the national title game. Even the Super Bowl is moving back to essentially this weekend, next year. So you're going to hear plenty of complaints, and I think it is going to kind of come to a head for a lot of folks and really register more than just kind of seeing it happen on the little calendar in front of them. It's going to register, as they get tired and as they kind of understand that, hey, something's got to change, and we kind of got to go back to how the sport was much more of a one-semester sport, in decades past.
Well, Bryan, we appreciate your time, man. Thanks for hanging out with us, and let's do it again here soon.
Absolutely. Great to jump on with you guys.
There he is, Bryan Fischer from Sports Illustrated, covering college athletics.